Hey everyone, I am Makamba Transmission, a music explorer and record collector based in Tokyo, Japan. In this video, I'm gonna do a deep dive into the records in my collection by one of my favorite jazz artists, Yosuke Yamashita from Japan. In case you're not familiar with him, he's a piano player born in Tokyo in 1942. His career spans more than 50 years, with more than 100 records published either solo, with the Yosuke Yamashita Trio, or as a collaborator with other musicians, and he still performs to this day. He was one of the leading figures in Japanese free jazz during the 70s, and in this video I'm going to focus mainly on his recordings with the Yamashita Trio. The first record in my collection is not the first record Yamashita put out, because that would be Dancing Kojiki, a live set from July 1969, recorded behind the barricades of an occupied Waseda University in Tokyo during the student protests of those years. Unfortunately, I don't have this one yet, but I have something related to it that I will show at the end of the video. Here is a short clip from the show. As you might have noticed, already pretty intense stuff. The first record you're seeing here is another live set, recorded just a couple of months later in September 1969 in Tokyo, called Concert in New Jazz. At the time, the lineup of the Yamashita Trio featured Takeo Moriyama on drums, Seiichi Nakamura on saxophone, and of course Yosuke Yamashita on piano. It was released by Union Records, and the pressing I have is a reissue from the late 70s, which I bought at Universe Sounds, a fantastic jazz record store in Koenji that I recommend visiting. The trio was playing a very different style of free jazz compared to other Japanese musicians at the time, artists like Masahiko Togashi, Masayuki Takayanagi, and Masahiko Sato. The trio was in fact generating a full-blown sound attack, where each piece developed from simple motifs that would explode into pure improvisation from each of the members. Yamashita's playing was already showing the unconventional style he'd later become famous for, like playing piano as if it was percussion or hammering the piano with his elbows at times. At the same time, Takeo Moriyama on drums, who wasn't even 25 years old at the time, was already showing incredible potential that can be heard in the furious drum solo at the end of Gugan. At one point, the intensity is so high that Moriyama hits one of the mics with his head, leaving a sharp thump sound on the recording that can clearly be heard. This is pure, raw, free jazz at its finest. It's already a defining moment in Japanese jazz, and for me, an absolute gem in my collection. The second record I am showing you is the Yamashita Trio first studio album, Mina's Second Theme, with this unsettling cover art. Released by Victor World Group in 1969, this is an original pressing that I bought at Face Records in Shibuya, Tokyo. The title track was used in a Pink movie from 1967 called Koya no Dachi Waifu, and it will be played multiple times in their live sets in the years to come. In my opinion, the trio gives its best during live sets, as it often is the case in jazz music, but this is still a very good record nonetheless. Next in my collection is Gugan, originally released in 1971 by Express. This is a studio record where Yamashita Trio is joined by an additional 12-piece brass section, including extra saxophones, trombones, tuba, trumpets, and more. My copy is the 1978 reissue, and I bought it at Face Records as well, and the original pressing had a different title, Introducing Takeo Moriyama. In the liner notes, Yamashita explains that with this title, he wanted to emphasize the crucial role of the drummer in the trio. This was a deliberate move to shift the focus away from the traditional jazz setup, where the pianist is often considered the pivotal member. By putting this focus on Takeo Moriyama, Yamashita acknowledged the contribution that percussion brought to their music, especially given Moriyama's explosive energy and innovative style. Then we have Clay, originally released in 1975 on the German label Enya. This copy is a Japanese reissue from 1982 that I got at Universounds. By the end of 1972, the saxophonist Seiichi Nakamura was replaced by Akira Sakata. In 1974, Horst Weber, the co-founder of Enya, invited the trio to play in Europe for the jazz festival season during the summer. This live record was recorded during this tour at the New Jazz Festival in Mors, Germany. It was an exciting era when different free jazz styles were converging. Several American musicians were making Europe their base, while European artists like Peter Brötzmann, Han Benning and Manfred Schuf were developing their own distinctive sounds. With the Yamashita Trio performing in Europe for the first time, the Japanese free jazz scene was stepping onto the international stage. Their style was different from the African American jazz tradition, maybe more similar to European free jazz, yet still uniquely their own and somewhat alien to Western audiences. At the same festival, heavyweights like Anthony Braxton, Steve Lacy, Albert Mangelsdorf, and Peter Brötzmann were performing, but the Yamashita Trio wasn't intimidated by these names. Their set kicked off with Mina's second theme, starting with a solo introduction by Yamashita himself. Then, Takeo Moriyama's drum kick tore through the silence, leading into an exciting drum solo, and the rest is history. What unfolded was a violent stream of sound piercing through the darkness. It felt like complete chaos at first, but everything came together beautifully in the end. The audience had never witnessed this type of jazz before, and they erupted in cheers after each solo. Legend has it that the crowd demanded a second encore and had to be calmed down to allow the next artist to perform. In exchange, the festival organizers promised that the trio would be back in the next edition. Next up is Frozen Days, the trio's fourth studio album, recorded in 1974. This is the original pressing, and I got it from the Disc Union Jazz branch of Kichijoji, Tokyo. This is one of my favorite cover designs of the trio, beautiful picture and color combination. On this record, Chiasma, Double Helix, and Mitochondria are introduced for the first time. These compositions became staples in their live performances and are fantastic examples of Yamashita's innovative approach to jazz. Let's continue with Up to Date, a double live recording from April 1975 at Kosei-Nenkin Kaikan in Shinjuku. This is an original Japanese pressing that I bought at Face Records, Shibuya. The inner sleeves are very well made, and there are some pictures of the trio and the usual personnel information. Here you can see the liner notes with these great pictures from the day of the recording in the studio. On the second record there is the track that gives the title to this record, and as far as I know, this is the only time this track ended up on wax. On the track you can witness a phenomenal performance by Moriyama, reaffirming his rightful place in the pantheon of jazz drummers, something that in my opinion was already clear after listening to Clay and the other records. Another release recorded during the European tour of 1975 is Chiasma, a live set from the Heidelberger Jazz Stage Festival in Germany. This is an original Japanese pressing. It is one of the better live recordings of the trio in terms of sound quality, so you are able to enjoy each instrument shining through. Again, the highlight here is Moriyama's drumming. If you listen closely to the track Horse Trip, you'll notice how his rhythms seamlessly intertwine with Yamashita's piano, creating an interplay that is at the same time intense and harmonious. Unfortunately, Moriyama will end up leaving the trio at the end of 1975 to focus on his solo career, but he also collaborated again with Akira Sakata and other artists on records released on the Frasco label. The trio stayed in Europe during the summer of 1975, and just 6 days later from the recordings of Chiasma, they recorded another live show in Stuttgart. This time, the trio is joined by Manfred Schoof on trumpet. He had a long-standing connection with the Yamashita Trio. In fact, the first time they played together was 4 years earlier at the Pit Inn in Shinjuku, when he was touring Japan as part of the German All-Stars. He was blown away by the trio's raw energy and their approach to free jazz, and he stayed in touch with Yamashita ever since. By the time the trio made their first trip to Europe in 1974, they performed together again, including a memorable set at the Berlin Jazz Festival. You can watch this performance also here on YouTube. Distant Thunder was released on Enya. The co-founder Horst Weber was the first person who invited the trio to Europe because he had a deep interest in Japanese jazz, especially its more experimental side, and he released several records by artists like Yamashita, Takeo Moriyama, Terumasa Hino, and Masahiko Sato. My copy is a 1986 Japanese reissue that I got at the usual Universounds. Now it's time to move to Montreux Afterglow, recorded live in 1976 at the prestigious Montreux Jazz Festival. After Moriyama left the trio at the end of 1975, he was replaced by Shota Koyama, who already played with Sakata and Yamashita in the Jam Rice Sextet. This record is the original Frasco pressing that I found at a small shop in Tokyo called Echo Records, and it's probably my favorite of the entire Yamashita discography. This performance was the last date of a packed 3-month European tour, with all the stops listed in the liner notes. During their live set, they performed 4 songs: Ghost, Banslikana, Clay, and Mina's second theme. Sadly, only the first 2 songs made it onto this record, and I still hope that one day we get a full release of that session. But what's here is nothing short of incredible. The A side, Ghosts, was originally written by Albert Ayler, but this is arguably the best rendition of the piece I've ever heard. Toward the end, the intensity ramps up to a point where Sakata starts screaming into the microphone, and all hell breaks loose in true free jazz fashion. It's pure mayhem, but it's the kind of chaos that only great musicians can control. On the B side, Banslikana begins with a moody, fragmented melody that quickly shatters, with Koyama keeping the energy high on the drums. As the piece progresses, Sakata picks up the infectious melody on sax, and it builds into an epic climax, highlighted by a drum solo from Koyama that just knocks it out of the park. For me, this is music at its finest. Records like this one make all the hours spent digging through crates and researching new music completely worth it. If there's one album that sums up what I love about Yamashita and free jazz, it's definitely this one. Moving on to this record with a very peculiar cover art, made by a coloring book artist. It's called Sunayama. The childish illustration is explained by the fact that 3 songs here were originally composed as children's songs by Shinpei Nakayama, and Yosuke Yamashita rearranged them for a jazz big band on this studio record from 1978. The trio is joined here by the trombone player Shigeharu Mukai, the jazz fusion guitarist Kiyoshi Sugimoto, a couple of trumpet session players, and a young Yasuaki Shimizu on tenor sax, who will go on to have a very interesting career both solo, as collaborator of other artists, and with the band Mariah. This is the original Japanese pressing from 1978, and I grabbed this pristine copy at Disc Union Oshinomizu branch. In the same shop I also got the next one. This is quite an odd one. It's a collaboration between the Yamashita Trio and Yasutaka Tsutsui, a famous science fiction writer. Tsutsui Yasutaka Bunmei was released by Victor in 1978, and it's an experimental spoken word performance accompanied by the Yosuke Yamashita Trio. The trio also participates in some of the reading of an old Japanese folk tale by saying and screaming, in the case of Akira Sakata, some lines each. This is definitely a minor record in the discography, at least from the musical side. It's not a bad record, but not up to par with the ones we've seen so far. Maybe understanding the lyrics would give this record more meaning, but it's not my case, so there's that. Hot Menu is another live record, this time in the US for the first time. The trio flew to New York in June 1979 to perform at the Newport Jazz Festival, and this is the result. This is the original Frasco pressing that I got at HMV Kichijoji. The tracks played here are two from the Sunayama studio album, Rabbit Dance and Sunayama, but played faster and in a more aggressive rendition compared to the studio album and the usual Mina second theme. Last but not least, this is a rare one. In 2022, the original Yamashita Trio, composed of Yosuke Yamashita, Seiichi Nakamura, and Takeo Moriyama, performed in a live set at Waseda University called The Second Jazz Attack, to replicate the show from 53 years earlier, published as Dancing Kojiki. At the time, the university was occupied by students that this time were simply in the audience. This live show was organized and hosted by the famous writer Haruki Murakami, who's a big jazz fan and has a radio show on Tokyo FM called Murakami Record. To release this record, he also set up a label with the same name, but as of now, this is the only release on the label. The packaging of this record is very well made, and it also includes a CD with interviews with Yosuke Yamashita, and it's a numbered edition. Not sure how many copies have been pressed, but mine is number 912, so probably at least 1000. All the members of the trio were older than 80 years old at the time of this recording, but the performance is nothing short of fantastic, and if you weren't aware of their age, you wouldn't have ever guessed. The A-side contains the same two pieces played during the original show, while the B-side has Mina's second theme and Gugan, followed by a solo encore by Yosuke Yamashita playing Memory is a Funny Thing. Even if this record has been released recently, it's a very difficult one to find in shops, and I grabbed it the first time I saw it. I found it at HMV Kichijoji for a very good price, around $40 for a near mint copy that looks exactly like new. I also have other records by Yosuke Yamashita, for example this one released as Yosuke Yamashita Trio, but it is actually only Yamashita on piano, Koyama on drums, and Katsuo Kuninaka on bass, playing Mal Waldron covers. Or this solo record released on Frasco, or this live collaboration with Aruna Miyake, or these collaborations with Masahiko Togashi. But in this video, I wanted to focus more on the legendary performances of the Yamashita Trio that shook the souls of jazz fans in Japan, Europe, and America, and I hope that I sparked your interest and that you'll dive into Yamashita and all the members of the trio discographies to explore more of their incredible work. Thanks for watching and I'll see you next time.